I've spoken to one of our really good sources, and they've told me that they have seen Superman, James Gunn's Superman, and that straight up, you are going to love or hate this movie. And there is nothing in between. Welcome to the Tachyon Pulse podcast.
Our tachyon pulse has been unable to completely penetrate the anomaly.
So, I have a source that's actually worked on Superman in different bits. Their name will appear on the credits, but I'm not going to tell you where. And they actually finally got to see a screening of the finished product, the full movie. Before that, they'd only really seen the bits that they'd worked on. And they've told me this is a film that people are going to love or hate, just straight up. And he went on to explain why. I'm going to tell you now as well, there will be no spoilers in this video. I don't want to ruin this film for anyone. This source has told me a few story plots. I wish he hadn't, to be fair, but I won't be sharing them with you in this video. I'm going to give you a very general overlook of why this source says it's very much a love or hate movie, and then I will encourage you all to go out and watch it and, one, support cinema, but two, really get your own opinion on this movie. So, let's start out with the positives. For one, he says, I've forgotten his name, the guy playing Superman does a great job. He says he has a vulnerability about him, which we don't normally get to see in Superman. And he brings sort of like a human element to the character, which I actually think is important, because what we've seen in the past is the Man of Steel. And even though they've hinted at some of the vulnerability, some of the, more the Clark Kent side of Superman, where he doesn't quite feel like he fits. That is really more humanized in this movie. We get to see both a unsure Superman and an unsure Clark Kent, which I actually think is really nice. Now, he says that the Lois Lane storyline is a little bit complicated. It goes through as a rush. This isn't sort of an origin story again, so we're not going to see that whole, even though we do apparently see a bit of the development of the relationship. But they basically shows the friction there with the relationship. And he says in other movies and series, except actually the Lois and the most recent Lois and Superman series, which I think actually did do this, it says you see a friction within the relationship, the journalist and the superhero. And he says that works really, really well. I asked him about the multiple characters in the series, and he actually pointed out to one major problem, before I get back to something else that's really good about the movie, but one major problem with it. He says, there's a lot in this book that if you are a comic book fan, if you know the history of many of these characters, on a comic book level, not just when they've appeared in other movies, etc., then you're going to really appreciate certain things, like the Nathan Fillion Guy Gardner character. If you know the comic books and you know that character, you'll appreciate Nathan Fillion's portrayal of him. But this also says, but if you don't, if you're not like a hardcore comic fan, you're just going to think this character is a buffoon. He's supposed to be funny, but if you don't get the joke, which is true for any really extroverted character, really, but he says if you don't get the joke, he's just going to be irritating. He also said that basically about the robots, which I've actually mentioned on live streams before, that you're supposed to love the robots that are in, and this isn't a spoiler because they're in the clip that we've already seen in a couple of the trailers. If you want that, you're supposed to feel an attachment to these characters because Superman does, in a way. They're almost parental figures. They look after him. They've cared for him, basically. you're supposed to feel that, but he says, but actually, you just get irritated by them. And I joked in a previous video, by the time that, again, a few of them die, which again is in the trailer, so it's not a spoiler, you're just glad they're dead or destroyed, however you want to put it. And that's not really what they were going for. So, something else that was really, really good, apparently, in this movie, is that, again, Superman has that vulnerability, but when he fights, he really fights. And he says that really, again, puts another side to the character, because the character loses quite badly at times in the movie. And it's not. It reminded me when he was telling me about this of that Rocky scene. I think it was Rocky 5, when he says it's not about how hard you get hit; it's about how well you then get up. It's something I've always sort of believed. It doesn't matter how you fail; it's how you then stand back up and try again or whatever. Learn from your cock-ups. I think that is going to be sort of core to this movie. The core principle to this film, or the thing you're supposed to take away from it, is that even if you're the Man of Steel, you can lose. And it's how you then get up, which really matters. I like that. I did ask about, again, all of these different characters that come into it, and obviously he mentioned that if you're a comic book fan, you're going to appreciate what James Gunn did with this, because James Gunn is an ultra comic book fan. I think he came out a couple of days ago and was sort of talking in an interview about how this is really an homage to all of the comic books he's loved over the years. And it really is what happens when somebody that is obsessed with something writes a script. But he has done it in a very James Gunn way. And I'm going to say to you that there is a lot of humour in this series, in this movie. I keep calling it a series, what's wrong with me? There's a lot of humour in this movie. I think Guardians of the Galaxy in tone and style. If you're going to want to watch Christopher Reeve Superman, or even Man of Steel, you're going to be disappointed by this film. But all the characters in it, I said, look, is it something you can follow, or is it just too much? And I would argue that's something DC have done in the past. They've tried to run before they can walk. Marvel, the first, 3 lots of the Marvel stages, they always sort of introduce characters and let them grow into the role before we hit the Avengers. DC have always been trying to play catch up. I said, have they done it again? Is this just too many characters too soon? And they basically said, yeah, this movie goes from 0 to 100 miles an hour. Now, again, you're either going to love or hate that. Because you could argue, look, we've had these characters introduced to us a million times before. And we've seen them in the cartoons and everything else. And never mind if you've actually read the comics. Is there any point at this stage to do all that introduction stuff again? So that's one way you could look at it. That actually James Gunn has just gone, look, we've done this, we don't need another origin story, let's just crack on. And I kind of respect that, to be honest, because I feel the same way about Batman. If I see one more origin story about Batman, I'm going to scream. And honestly, I'll pull whatever hair I've got left out. So I like that James Gunn's done that. But what the source was basically saying was, it does mean that the movie really ticks along. You don't get much character development with some of the characters. I'm thinking maybe Hawk Girl. This source didn't mention that specifically, but I'm wondering. I think Nathan Fillion's Green Lantern is going to get a fair bit of screen time in this, but I think the other Green Lantern might not. But we'll see. Again, source didn't tell me that. That's just what I'm wondering from the few things I've heard and seen. But basically, there's so much going on at times. It's like all of those other characters are just sort of in the orbit of Superman, and it's only really the Superman that gets that development. But again, you could argue the movie's called Superman, so bleh. So basically, what I'm taking away from this conversation with this source, that they saw the movie day before yesterday, is that as fans, we're going to come away from this either adoring the movie or hating it. And if you're a Superman fan, for me, I'm really looking forward to this. The first trailer dropped, and I thought, oh god, this is going to disappoint me. The second trailer dropped, and I'm like, oh, I can see what James Gunn's doing with that now, and I started to get really excited about it. If you are, again, a regular to my channel, you'll know I've actually seen bits of the movie. So, I'm quite excited. But I think this source has basically come to me and told me that the fears I've had about this movie are about to be fulfilled. There are haters on YouTube, there always will be, that will gleefully tell you that maybe it's not done as well at the cinema as they hoped and blah blah blah, and they'll point out the bits of the movie that don't work, and that's always going to happen. I'm hoping when you get to see it that you're one of the people that love it, that enjoy the fast-paced, the quick action, the over-the-top villains and things. But if you're not, and you just come away thinking it's a mess, that's a shame. The one thing that I was told, though, if you like comic books and you like the way graphic novels and comic books are written and created, you are going to appreciate this movie. You are going to appreciate the way it's put together. And I like comic books. So, yay. But guys, get into the comments and tell me what you think. Is this something you are really, really looking forward to? And do you know what I mean about the haters that are out there that have already basically been telling you this film's going to be a load of rubbish? Unfortunately, that's something we have to live with on YouTube, isn't it? But is this a movie, though, you are excited about? Get into the comments and tell us. If you are new to the channel, don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the bell notification, do all those things. And don't forget as well that members get to see a lot of our videos first. So if you want to see the videos first, become a member. As always, please stay safe, and I'll see you next time.
Our tachyon pulse has been unable to completely penetrate the anomaly.